Welcome to our channel. Today, we dive into a gripping story of love, betrayal, and resilience in The Unfolding Secrets, a husband's journey through a cheating wife's deception. Follow the life of Evan Mitchell, a successful aerospace engineer, whose seemingly perfect world is shattered when his beloved wife Madison reveals a shocking affair. As Evan navigates through heartbreak, deceit, and legal battles, he discovers his inner strength and the true meaning of family. Join us as we explore this emotional and inspiring tale of redemption and triumph. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Evan Mitchell's life was seemingly perfect. At the age of 31, he was a successful aerospace engineer living in Chicago, Illinois, working at Skytech Aerospace, a prominent company collaborating with NASA. They were developing a new generation of spacecraft with a unique winged design, capable of landing like an airplane. This innovative project had captivated the aerospace community, and Evan was right at the heart of it. Evan had a beautiful wife, Madison, whom he adored. They had been married for nearly 9 years and had built a loving family together. Their 3 children, Liam, a bright 7-year-old boy, and twin 6-year-old girls, Chloe and Ava, were the light of their lives. The Mitchell family lived in a spacious 4-bedroom house in a charming suburb of Chicago. The house had ample space for their growing family, with Liam having his own room and the twins sharing another. They had even converted the basement into a guest apartment, planning ahead for when the girls would need separate rooms. Evan met Madison in college back in 2006. He was pursuing his undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering while Madison was a freshman majoring in pre-law. They fell in love almost immediately. Evan served 4 years in the Marine Corps between his undergraduate and graduate studies, qualifying for veterans' educational benefits, which helped him complete his education. During this time, Madison finished her degree and started working at a law firm. They got married in 2009, shortly after Madison graduated. Their life was picture perfect. Madison took a break from her career after the birth of Liam and the twins, dedicating herself entirely to their upbringing. This decision strengthened their bond and allowed Evan to focus on his demanding career at Skytech Aerospace. Madison eventually returned to work part-time at the law firm once the children started school, providing a balance between her professional ambitions and family responsibilities. Evan's parents and Madison's parents lived just an hour away, visiting frequently to spend time with their beloved grandchildren. Madison's sister, Isabel, also lived nearby, providing an additional support system. Evan's job required a delicate balance between his professional and personal life, but he managed it well, always prioritizing his family. Their neighborhood was the epitome of tranquility. It was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. Neighbors often gathered for barbecues, holiday celebrations, and casual get-togethers. Evan and Madison were well-liked in their community, and their children played with the other kids on the block, creating a sense of belonging and security. Skytech Aerospace was a dream come true for Evan. He had joined the company right after earning his degree and quickly climbed the ranks due to his exceptional skills and dedication. The project he was working on involved developing a spacecraft that would set a new standard for space travel. Unlike the traditional space shuttles, this new spacecraft would be designed solely for passenger transport, accommodating 8 people. It would land automatically, without any pilot input, a feature that set it apart from its predecessors. Evan's specific role in the project was to design a rescue system. This system would ensure the safety of all crew members by allowing them to be ejected in their own pressurized capsules at any stage of the flight. It was a challenging and exhilarating job, pushing Evan to apply all his knowledge and creativity. Despite his demanding job, Evan always made time for his family. Weekends were sacred, filled with family outings, games, and activities. He cherished these moments, knowing how quickly time flew by. Madison was his rock, always supporting him and managing their household with grace and efficiency. Their love life was still passionate, and they made efforts to keep the romance alive despite their busy schedules. But then, subtle changes began to creep into their lives. Madison started dressing more provocatively, which Evan initially brushed off as a natural desire to look good. Their sex life, once vibrant and frequent, began to wane. Madison started working longer hours, often coming home late, claiming she was busy with a new project under her boss, Vincent Collins. Evan had met Vincent several times at social events and company gatherings. He found Vincent to be arrogant and controlling, which raised his suspicions, but he never imagined the extent of the trouble brewing. One Friday evening, as the twins were finishing their last day of kindergarten, Evan decided to surprise Madison with a romantic weekend, hoping to rekindle their relationship. He arranged for his parents to take the kids for the weekend, envisioning a perfect getaway with his wife. He picked up the children from school and drove them to his parents' house. On his way back, he felt a sense of anticipation, eager to spend some quality time with Madison. When Evan arrived home, he found Madison already dressed up, looking stunning. She was wearing makeup, a tight dress, and high heels, clearly ready for a night out. Evan's heart swelled with love and admiration. "Wow, baby, you look amazing. If you had told me we were going on a date, I would have rushed home. Give me a few minutes to wash up and change, and I'll be ready to go out." "Where are we going?" he asked, smiling. Madison's expression changed. A smirk appeared on her face, one that didn't suit her at all. "We aren't going anywhere, Evan. I am going out, just not with you." Evan's heart sank. "What are you saying?" Madison looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I have a date with my boss, Vincent Collins. And that's just the beginning. Starting today, we're going to have new rules. Vincent is coming to pick me up to spend the night in town. I won't be home tonight or Saturday night. We have a suite downtown. I'll be back sometime Sunday afternoon." Evan was shocked and couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted. "You need to calm down and accept it. This is the way it's going to be. I'm leaving, and I'll be home Sunday afternoon. If you think I'm going to put up with this, you're crazy. You're out the door and don't plan on coming back." "No, Evan. I'm coming home to our house. We will remain husband and wife, and I will still live here, just like you. You have to understand that I still love you, but I need more. If you insist on making things more complicated, you are the one who will no longer live here. It would be a disgrace for the father of our children to be left penniless and in jail. Now you need to sit down with me and talk about the changes that have taken place and that you will have to get used to. I want to do it the easy way before Vincent gets here in about 30 minutes. If he has to explain everything to you, you'll like it even less." Evan was overwhelmed, feeling ambushed. He squeezed past Madison and started climbing the stairs. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "I'm going to wash up and change. I'll be down in 5 minutes." As a former Marine who had been ambushed 3 times in the Middle East, Evan knew the rules of engagement. First, try to see the ambush coming, which he failed to do. Second, take cover immediately, which he did by retreating to the temporary safety of his bedroom. Third, come up with a plan to extract himself and his men. He needed a plan, and he devised one quickly. Evan changed out of his suit into casual pants and a sport shirt with a breast pocket. He set his iPhone to record and slipped it into his pocket, ensuring the camera lens peeked out. He needed to know exactly what Madison and Vincent had planned for him. In the dressing room, Evan knelt in front of an old shoebox labeled, Captain E. Mitchell, USMC. He swiped the shoes off the lid, retrieved a key taped to the back of the locker, and opened it. Inside was his Marine Corps Beretta 9mm pistol, in a fabric-lined plastic case with 2 magazines of 9 rounds each. The pistol had special meaning to him, having saved his life in combat more than once. He loaded a clip into the grip and heard Madison at the bottom of the stairs say, "Get your ass down here, Evan, or you'll be sorry." "I'll be right down. Get me a beer, will you?" he replied. Evan flipped the bolt to put a round in the chamber, slipped the gun behind his belt at the middle of his back, and pulled his knit shirt over it. He left the bedroom, turned on the recording on his cell phone, and placed it back in his pocket. When Evan arrived in the living room, Madison was sitting at the dining room table with a glass of white wine in front of her and a cold beer for him. "It's about time," she admonished. "We have some things to take care of before Vincent gets here." "Sounds like you have a lot to say, Madison. Tell me about this new reality I have to accept. First of all, I want you to remember that I love you more than anything in the world. I have a family with you, and I want to grow old and die in your arms. I really don't want to hurt your feelings, honey," she started before Evan interrupted her. "No more weasel words, Madison. I'm not sweetheart, honey, darling, or love. Just call me Evan, and I'll call you Madison." Madison took offense at his lack of endearment but continued. Again, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but as of tonight, circumstances have changed, and you have to accept those changes, or else. You should know that Vincent and I have become very close since he made me his personal assistant. We've been having an affair for almost 7 months now. He started flirting with me shortly after I went back to work as a secretary. Then we got into the habit of having coffee together during breaks. When he made me his executive secretary, we started spending a lot more time together, and his flirting became more like seduction. It was easy to see what he wanted, and I was flattered that such a powerful and important man was showing interest in me. One day after work, he made his move. "Obviously, you haven't thought about becoming an adulteress or making me a cuckold," Evan said. Madison replied, "I'm sorry, Evan, but I haven't. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. You're still the person I want to spend the rest of my life with." Evan sipped his beer and said, "Good luck making that happen." "Tell me, Madison, why, after 7 months of successfully cheating and lying to me, did you decide to come clean? You could have gone on like this for years, and I would never have known about it." We both decided we were tired of it. We wanted to be open enough to enjoy our relationship to the fullest. That meant we wanted to sleep together at night, go out and travel together as lovers. The only way to do that was to get you to accept the lifestyle we wanted. Evan sipped another beer and said, "Again, good luck making it happen." No, Evan." Madison leaned forward and tried to take his hands in hers. "There's not going to be a divorce. We're going to stay married. You just have to accept the fact that Vincent and I will be seeing a lot of each other. I'll be staying overnight at his place at least 1 or 2 nights a week. Sometimes we'll vacation together on weekends, and sometimes I might go on an extended vacation with him to Europe or the Caribbean or something. Also, as his assistant, I will be traveling with Vincent and meeting many important people. I will attend all his business meetings and accompany him to social events such as dinners at the homes of his influential friends. Vincent is paying me a lot of money. This will be good for us. Think of the benefits. Think of all the things we'll be able to afford: vacations, our kids' college tuition. We can finally upgrade that lake house we've always talked about. You think I'd want any of that paid for with money earned by being Vincent's mistress?" "I'm not a mistress," Madison replied angrily. "I'm an asset to the company. I'm the confidant Vincent needs to run his law firm. Entertaining is part of the business of a powerful and influential man. I am proud that such a great man has allowed me to be his mistress, and you should be proud too. Besides, this relationship probably won't last forever. I think it will last 2 or 3 years, no more. And then everything will be as before. I'll be your faithful wife again, and we'll enjoy our wonderful family together for the next 50 years. Besides, you should know that Vincent wants to be your friend. He believes that I can be shared as long as he gets what he wants and you meet his requirements. He knows that I love you and still want you to make love to me. Vincent even said you can have fun with me sometimes. There will just be some conditions since he'll be visiting us at our house occasionally. He really wants to become a family friend, maybe even become an attentive uncle to our children." Internally, Evan was furious but maintained a relatively calm demeanor. "This jerk will never see or talk to my kids ever. Do you understand me correctly?" And then it hit him. Why would this jerk want to get close to my family? Doesn't he have a family of his own? Vincent is married to a beautiful girl who is almost 20 years younger than him. She comes from a very prominent family. In many ways, it was a marriage of convenience, but unfortunately, she is infertile and cannot have children. Maybe they should adopt someone and stay out of other people's marriages. Vincent really wants to have kids of his own, at least one. He wants a blood heir to whom he'll someday pass his law practice. He would prefer a son, but a daughter would be acceptable as well. Ideally, he'd like to have both. Then why doesn't he use a surrogate? Then he can have as many kids as he wants, Evan reasoned. He talked to me about it. He told me that he really wants to be the father of a child or children, but he'd make a terrible dad. He wants any child he has to grow up in a loving family. Madison then hung her head. "Oh my God, I can't wait to hear this," Evan said, getting even angrier. Then I realized what Madison meant. He wants to impregnate you, doesn't he? And then he wants me to be a daddy to his baby out of wedlock. It wouldn't be an illegitimate child, Madison stated adamantly. It would be my baby too, and I would love him just like you do because you love me, and his last name would be Collins. Vincent would pay us a lot of money to raise the baby and take care of all the expenses until his son or daughter graduated from college. Are you pregnant yet? Evan asked. No, she replied, but he wants me to stop taking the pill in a few months. I told him I want you to be okay with a new relationship before we do that. This just keeps getting better and better, Evan said to himself. And again I repeated, good luck making it happen. Madison got angry. Stop saying that, she demanded. I know you feel that way now, Evan, but after some time has passed, we hope you'll change your mind. Evan was stunned by her words. Just as he stood up to confront her, the doorbell rang. Madison ran to the door, letting Vincent in. As she crossed the threshold, he wrapped one arm around her waist, and they kissed. This just keeps getting better and better, Evan said to himself again. How did he take it? Vincent asked Madison. Not well. I think you need to explain the consequences of non-compliance, she said. I heard him reply, then we'll move on to plan B, shock and awe. Vincent was an imposing man. At 6 feet 2 inches and slightly overweight, he had a commanding presence. His long, wavy, graying hair gave him a distinguished look, and he exuded authority in his black three-piece suit. His hard voice and confident demeanor were well suited for a courtroom. Vincent stepped up close to Evan, invading his personal space. Mr. Mitchell, I believe we need to talk. Talk? I need to kick your ass. You can try, and from the looks of you, I might be able to land a couple of good punches before my driver storms in here and kicks your ass. You'll be in jail by tonight, so get in line. Evan looked out the door and saw a large man standing on the doorstep. It didn't scare him, but he wanted to hear what Vincent had to say. Muttering, he sat down. Great, now we can talk like civilized people. When your wife agreed to become my personal assistant, she took on other responsibilities as well. I have enjoyed your wife for the past 6 months, but we are tired of meeting in secret. You two will have a new relationship. As my personal assistant, she will provide me with professional and personal services as needed. Mr. Mitchell, you will remain Madison's husband. Your role as husband and father will not change, with one exception. I will take care of Madison's needs. Most of the time, those needs will be met at the hotel or at the office, but sometimes when you are not home, we will have to use your bed. You bastard. What makes you think I'm going to put up with this? I'm going to divorce her cheating ass before I put up with all this. Mr. Mitchell, this kind of talk is unproductive. Don't forget the business I'm in. I'm a big-time attorney with the power of the largest law firm in town. If you try to divorce her, you'll be punished. I don't just mean divorce, of course. In a divorce, we will take everything away from you and make you pay her alimony and child support, and she will continue to have fun with me. Your wonderful little son and twin daughters that you cherish so much? You won't see them very often, if at all. You will be put in jail for a certain amount of time, and you will never see your children again. I'm sure your company will fire you on the spot. In addition, your family and friends will disown you. Evan sat stunned, not knowing what to say. He had no idea that Madison and Vincent were willing to go this far to promote their blatant connections. Vincent continued, Now, I know you won't do anything stupid. If you try to tell my wife, all the hell I just explained to you will fall on your head, plus a visit from my driver and his friends, after which you probably won't be able to walk, much less lay with a woman. If you try to just leave town, my private investigators will track you down. So be a good boy and just accept this new relationship. Your wife is a wonderful assistant. Evan turned to Madison and asked, Would you really do these things to me? She replied, I wouldn't want to, Evan, and I don't have to, as long as you play ball. After a while, you'll see that this will become the norm for you, and you won't give these arrangements a second thought. Still stunned, Evan watched his wife and Vincent walk toward the door. Vincent picked up her overnight bag and was almost out the door when Evan interrupted them. Before you go, I want to tell you a few things. Annoyed and rolling his eyes in silent contempt, Vincent said, What things exactly? And be quick about it. Evan began, After I have a couple of drinks and pay for the death of my marriage, I'm going to call your wife and tell her everything you don't want her to hear. He then turned to Madison. Then I will call your sister Isabel and tell her all the same things. I'll let her tell your parents. Vincent wasn't sure he understood correctly because it went against everything he was used to when trying to commit extortion. What did you say? He asked. Without repeating himself, Evan continued, Early Saturday morning, I'm going to call a locksmith and change all the locks. Now Madison was listening and trying to comprehend what was happening. After the locks are changed, I'm going to walk down the block to our neighbor Kate's house and take her out for an evening of dinner, dancing, and drinks. I never told you, but she's been shamelessly flirting with me starting just a few months after her husband died. She may be a little older than me and doesn't have a movie star face like you, but she has an amazing body. She even modeled one of her bikinis for me. Until an hour ago, I wouldn't have thought of leaving you, Madison, but things have changed, haven't they? Madison put on a hurt expression and stammered, Evan, you can't do that. I continued, when you two come back Sunday afternoon, you'll find all of Madison's stuff in the middle of the yard. It's everything she owns. All her clothes, shoes, personal items, makeup, jewelry, and even our wedding album. And it won't all be in plastic garbage bags. You should arrange to pick them up before 4 a.m. Monday morning because that's when the automatic sprinklers go off. Vincent began to boil. He turned red and clenched his fists, unable to believe that all his threats against Evan were worthless. Madison's face took on a pained expression. One last thing, Evan prepared to conclude his rebuttal. I'm going to make an appointment with a divorce attorney on Monday morning. Not only am I going to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, but I'm going to name you, Vincent, as a co-defendant. In addition, I am going to sue you for alienation of affection and another suit against your firm for violating your company's fraternization policy. I assume a company as large as yours has one. And even if those two lawsuits are dismissed, which is likely, they will publicly embarrass you and your firm and diminish you, Vincent, in the eyes of your colleagues. Vincent was furious. He threw the overnight bag against the wall and walked purposefully toward Evan, once again invading his personal space. He poked Evan hard in the chest with 2 fingers. It took all of Evan's self-control not to respond. Listen, cuckold, Vincent began. You obviously have no idea who you're dealing with or how ruthless I can be with someone I want to crush. I'm Vincent Collins. I run the largest law firm in the county. I could legally destroy you in a day. By the time Madison and I get to our hotel, you'll be arrested on every charge you can imagine. And don't think that being innocent will save you. I've practiced law in this state for 30 years. I am personally acquainted with most of the top police officials, and I am friends with many of the attorneys in the DA's office. What's more, I've even entertained some of them. Most of the judges in this city either owe me favors or know that I have dirt on them. Even the politicians are on my side because I've often helped them get elected one way or another. Vincent was on a roll, and Evan didn't want to stop him. If you go for a walk with your friend Kate tomorrow night, the police will stop you and find a reason to search your car. There's a good chance they'll find drugs. And that's just the beginning. How long and how expensive will it be for you to fight these charges? You won't be able to find a lawyer anywhere who's willing to go up against me. You'll never recover. In the meantime, I'll still be entertaining your wife. Do you understand, cuckold? Evan believed every word Vincent said. Vincent turned to Evan again. You need to show me more respect, cuckold. You should call me, sir, or Mr. Collins. If you call me an asshole one more time, I'll have Carter teach you some manners. Saying that, Vincent tried to hit Evan, but Evan hit him first. He pushed Vincent away, and Vincent collapsed on the couch. Madison came to his aid. You goddamn son of a bitch, you're going to pay for this. I will destroy you, Vincent threatened. Remembering his bodyguard standing at the closed front door, Vincent shouted, Carter, come here. The front door immediately opened, and Carter walked in. He was big, looking like a villain from some 1940s noir movie who doesn't know his own strength. Yes, Mr. Collins, Carter said. Vincent pointed at Evan with his hand and said, take care of him, Carter. Yes, Mr. Collins, Carter replied and headed across the living room toward Evan. Madison tried to protest, but Vincent didn't bother to calm her down and waved her away. Evan had anticipated this kind of altercation when Madison first mentioned that Vincent would have his bodyguard with him. He knew he might get a few insults from him. However, it was going to be bad. Evan stood his ground and watched undefended as Carter brought his anvil-like hand up and launched it at his head. Evan absent-mindedly thought, can this blood be washed off, or will I have to buy new carpet? He was clearly in pain, and Carter didn't know if he should keep hitting him. He turned to Vincent for advice. Hit him, Carter, was what he was told. Evan realized he couldn't take any more of this and stay conscious and sane. Carter looked at him and asked if he could get up. Evan looked up at him and said, you hit like a girl. Now Carter's ego was bruised in front of his employer. Evan watched as Carter's right hand came up for another punch. You had to be there to see the surprised look on Carter's face when Evan shot him in the leg. The explosion of the 9mm semi-automatic surprised more than just Carter. The sound of the shot rang like a thunderclap in the confined room. Evan saw the look on Carter's face change as he realized he'd gotten into a gunfight. Carter looked at Evan glumly and began fumbling in his coat pocket for his gun. "Don't do it, Carter," Evan shouted and pointed the gun at him. There was another thunderclap and more smoke. Evan quickly crawled over to Carter, picked up the gun, and put it in his pocket. Then he said, "How much respect do you think I have for you?" Carter shook his head left and right. "That's right, Carter, none," Evan said. "Then I have no particular reason not to destroy you, do I?" Carter groaned, "I have a family." "Well, Carter, I have a family too, and you didn't seem to have much respect for mine." "Please," Carter pleaded. I looked over Carter's shoulder and said, "If I don't get you to a doctor within an hour or so, you'll probably disappear. And if I do get you there, don't worry. Those orthopedic doctors can fix anything with all the plastic and ceramic bone substitutes they make. Hopefully, you won't have to learn to eat right and shoot a gun with your left hand." Carter nodded that he understood. The mistake Evan had made was leaving the enemy at his back. The first thing that reminded him of that mistake was Madison's warning, "Evan, look out." Evan turned with his gun hand raised and saw Vincent bring the fireplace poker down on his head. No doubt he would have destroyed Evan had his hand not protected his head. However, the poker struck Evan's right forearm, and he knew from the pain that it was broken from the force of the blow. He let go of the gun, and it fell to the floor. Vincent's attention was drawn to the gun now lying a few feet away from him. Evan snatched the gun with his left hand and pounced on it like a stink bug on a summer night. "Now, where's your cell phone?" Evan asked. Vincent indicated it was in the left breast pocket of his coat. Evan pulled it out. "Turn it on," he told him. Vincent took it and, using his thumbprint, turned it on. "Now call your wife on FaceTime." Vincent's eyes widened to the size of quarters, but he did what Evan told him. The phone rang a few times before a pretty woman answered. "Stanley, why are you calling me at this hour?" "Who are you?" the woman asked, seeing a face she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Collins," Evan said. "My name is Evan Mitchell. You don't know me, but you may know my wife, Madison Mitchell. She is Vincent's personal assistant." Mrs. Collins replied, "Yes, I know Madison. She is a very nice woman. What on earth is this about? Why do you have my husband's phone, and where is he?" "I'm sitting on your husband, Mrs. Collins, and I have a gun." Evan turned the phone so she could see her husband's face. "Oh my God," she screamed into the receiver. "Don't touch him. Look, Mrs. Collins, I don't have much time. You must know that my wife and your husband have been entertaining each other for the last 6 or 7 months. Today, they told me they were going to go to a hotel for the weekend. When I disagreed with that, your husband asked his bodyguard to process me. Unfortunately for Carter, I had to defend myself, and now I'm going to defend myself against your husband. My husband is supposed to be at our desert home in Palm Springs this weekend, working on a case he has scheduled to present in court next week," Mrs. Collins said, sounding both shocked and betrayed. "He lied to you, Mrs. Collins. He's here on the floor of my house right now. Oh, and this is my wife, Madison." Evan turned the phone so Mrs. Collins could see Madison sitting on the couch with her palms on her cheeks, wearing a frightened expression on her face. "As you can see, Mrs. Collins, my wife is willing to spend a night on the town with your husband before they head to the hotel he has booked for tonight and Saturday." Mrs. Collins replied, "I can't believe this is happening." "I was surprised too," Evan said. "I have to hang up the phone, Mrs. Collins. The police will be here shortly. It was nice talking to you." He tossed the phone to the floor and turned his attention back to Vincent. "Well, it looks like your wife is now vaguely aware of your extracurricular activities. What were you going to do if I told her anything?" "Oh yeah, you were going to ask Carter and a few of his friends to visit me, after which I'd be crippled and washed up." Glancing over to Carter, Evan said, "Carter probably won't be able to do this job for a while." Then motioning to Vincent, he added, "Listen up. If you send anyone after me, I'll destroy them. I'll destroy them all, and then I'll come after you. Is that clear?" Vincent nodded his head affirmatively. At that moment, Evan smelled something foul. "Vincent, did you just shit your pants?" he laughed. Evan looked at Madison. "Bring me my briefcase, please, babe." Nervously, Madison picked up Evan's briefcase from where he had left it when he first got home. When she set it down next to him, he opened it and pulled out his laptop. Is this the same computer you were going to use to blackmail me? Vincent looked at the computer but didn't say anything. Evan turned the laptop over so he could see the bottom of it and reveal the hard drive. Then he placed it next to Vincent's head and fired 2 bullets into it. The explosion from his gun surprised everyone again, and once more, the room smelled like smoke. Evan leaned over to Vincent's right ear and said, "Try loading that computer with something now." Once in the kitchen, Evan pulled out his cell phone, which was still recording. He pointed it at his face as the last % of power drained out of the battery. He looked at the phone and said to himself, "I can't let the police get their hands on that recording. If they do, and Vincent has as much influence over the police as he says he does, I can imagine the tape being erased. I have to hide it." He quickly opened the bottom kitchen drawer to the right of the sink and put the phone in the folds of a stack of clean dish towels. There was little chance of it being accidentally discovered there. Finally, Evan wet a towel with water and wiped his face. His eye was badly swollen shut, and he couldn't see anything anymore, not even shadows. His head hurt, and he wondered if he had a concussion. He was only gone for a minute, and when he re-entered the living room, everyone was in their seats. "Everyone stay where you are until the police arrive. They should be here in a few minutes. I think an ambulance will be just around the corner." With those words, Evan stepped out onto the porch. The first thing he saw were several of his neighbors lined up on the sidewalk. One of them said, "Were those the shots we heard, Evan?" "Yes, those were gunshots," Evan replied. "Did anyone call 911? 2 people raised their hands. One of Evan's neighbors was retired Marine Colonel Orson Sage. They were best friends and often drank beer together. Evan always called him Colonel, and the Colonel called him Captain. "Are you wounded, Captain?" the Colonel asked. "You should see the other guys," Evan replied. In the distance, he could hear the howling of sirens. He knew the police would be there in a few minutes. "Colonel," Evan called out, "could you do me a favor? I need some help." "Sure, Captain," the Colonel replied and stepped off the sidewalk onto Evan's porch steps. "First of all, help me unload my weapons and put them on the table by the porch. I don't want to be seen waving one of these around when the police pull up." The Colonel took the gun Evan had taken from Carter's hands, which Evan pulled from his pocket. He quickly removed the clip from the Beretta, refilled it, and took the cartridge from the chamber, placing them on the table. Then he unloaded Carter's revolver and placed the pistol and cartridges next to the semi-automatic. Kate, a widowed neighbor from up the street, saw that Evan was badly beaten and came over intending to help him. While they were both there, Evan turned to the Colonel and said, "I wish I had time to explain everything to you, but I have none. You should know that I had a fight with my wife's boyfriend. He's a high-ranking lawyer, and he threatened to stuff my car with drugs and then let the cops arrest me." Evan handed the Colonel his keys. "Would you be so kind as to, after this circus is over late tonight and if they haven't taped the garage with crime scene tape, take my car and hide it for me? The code on the garage door is the same number as my street address." "Will do, Captain," the Colonel replied. Kate interjected into the conversation, "You don't look well, Evan." "My head is starting to hurt, and I'm dizzy," Evan replied. "Maybe I got hit harder than I thought." Kate helped Evan sit down on the porch steps just as 2 police cars with red and blue flashers and blaring sirens pulled up. They made their way through the neighbors, who were mostly standing on the sidewalk and across the street. They approached the house, keeping their guns at the ready. The Colonel assured them there was no danger and pointed to the unloaded shotguns on the table by the porch. They asked if anyone was inside, and Evan said yes. There were 3 people inside, one of whom was wounded and needed medical attention. One of the police officers looked at Evan and said, "It looks like you need medical attention too." At this time, 2 ambulances arrived on the scene. They also had their lights flashing and sirens blaring. Immediately, 2 or 3 emergency medical technicians got out of their vehicles, crossed the yard, and went up onto the porch. One of the police officers inside the house came out to meet them and told them there was a man in the living room with 2 gunshot wounds. The technicians disappeared into the house to do their job. Meanwhile, Evan's head was starting to spin faster and faster. Kate told him to lie down. One of the medics hovered over him and began examining his face. Evan told him that he thought his right forearm was broken. He wasn't semi-conscious until sometime later when the medics carried Carter out on a stretcher. Evan vaguely remembered Vincent being helped to the ambulance with his coat wrapped around his waist. The female officer then led Madison out of the house and toward the police car. She stopped suddenly when she saw Evan lying on the porch with two paramedics tending to him. She was crying. The sight of Evan's face must have made her stop and pull away from the attendants. "Evan, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. This is not what I wanted," she wailed. "I didn't mean for you to get hurt." She tried to lean over to touch him, but Evan raised his hand and pushed her away. "Go to hell, Madison," was all he said. Then her handmaiden picked her up and pulled her toward the police car. Evan didn't know if he passed out or if the medic gave him something to ease the pain. Whatever happened, he was out for 3 days. When he first woke up, his vision was blurry, but he was looking into the eyes of an angel in white. When his vision cleared a little, he noticed that it was actually a 60-year-old angel, but she was still beautiful. "Mr. Mitchell, can you hear me?" she said. "I'm so glad you're back with us." "I must be in the hospital," Evan said. "Yes," she replied. "You're in Mercy General Hospital in Chicago. You have been asleep for 3 days." "3 days?" Evan exclaimed, coming to his senses a little. "Yes, that long. I'll get the doctor now. He'll explain everything to you. Just relax. By the way, my name is Rose." While he was alone in the room, Evan began to assess himself. His right forearm was in a cast that went from his elbow to his wrist. With his good hand, he felt his face. There was gauze and tape over his left eye and nose. Touching his eye or nose was painful. Barring injuries to his head and arm, he seemed to be fine. However, he was hooked up to several machines that beeped regularly. One machine was giving him a saline drip. Looking under the blanket, he noticed he was connected to a catheter. Finally, he had a blood pressure sleeve on his arm that was inflating and deflating regularly. When he finished analyzing himself, Rose reappeared with the doctor, who introduced himself as Dr. York. In shorthand, Dr. York described Evan's condition. He had a simple fracture of his right forearm, a broken nose that probably wouldn't be too disfigured, and a black and blue, swollen eye. It would all heal. He was kept under sedation for 3 days because, in the doctor's opinion, he had a minor concussion, and he wanted Evan's brain to rest. Since Evan woke up already late in the evening, Dr. York decided to give him something to make him sleep until morning. Within minutes, Evan was out again. When Evan woke up in the morning, he was in for a surprise. His left wrist was handcuffed to the bed rail. "What the devil?" he exclaimed when he realized what it was and pulled on it. "Relax, Mr. Mitchell," said a voice. Looking around the room, Evan saw a middle-aged man in a suit with a loose tie. "Hi, I was told you were about to wake up," the man said. "What's going on? Why am I handcuffed to a hospital bed? I don't think it's because you were afraid I'd fall out." "I'm Detective Sergeant Hardman," the man said, "and no, Mr. Mitchell, we weren't worried about you falling out of bed. We were worried that you might run away." "Run away? Does it look like I'm in a position to run anywhere? And why would I even want to run away? You're handcuffed because you're under arrest." "What?" Evan exclaimed again. "Yes, you're under arrest for assault with intent to commit murder, assault with a deadly weapon, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and a number of less serious charges such as unlawful discharge of a firearm. Later today, after being seen by a doctor, you will be moved to a secure room on the 3rd floor. At that time, your handcuffs will be removed." "And where did all these charges come from?" Evan demanded. "The original complaint was filed by Mr. Vincent Collins on his own behalf, on behalf of Mr. Carter Stone, and your wife, Madison Mitchell." "I should have known," Evan said to himself. "Before we continue," said the detective, "I must read you your Miranda rights." The detective obediently read Evan his rights and then left the room. A few minutes later, Rose came into Evan's room. She was silent as she gathered his statistics. "Did you know about this, Rose?" Evan said and raised his hand to make the handcuffs jingle. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell," she replied. "I'm very sorry. None of this is true, Rose. Believe me, and I'll take you out to dinner when it's over. Then I'll believe you. It better be a 5-star restaurant," she joked. A few hours later, Dr. York came to see Evan. He basically said Evan would heal with time. Then he said Evan would soon be moved to another room and have a different doctor. Shortly after that, Detective Hardman came back with several orderlies. Evan was wheeled up to the 3rd floor, past a uniformed police officer standing guard at the entrance, and into a small private room. The handcuffs were removed as unnecessary since the room had a lock on the outside of the door. Evan was reconnected to the hospital machines. Before leaving, the detective told Evan that in a few days, when he was feeling better, he would appear in court before a judge via closed-circuit television where he could enter a guilty plea. The detective asked if Evan had an attorney, and Evan said he did not. The detective said he would send a representative from the public defender's office for an initial interview, and after that, Evan could decide what to do. In his spare time, Evan reflected on how quickly his life had taken a right angle. He mourned the loss of his wife so suddenly and, at night, cried over the instantaneous dissolution of his marriage. Then his thoughts turned to his children. Where had they been? What were they being told? Who was taking care of them? Evan also wanted to know how things were going with his job. He had been gone for 4 days and hadn't warned anyone that he wouldn't be back right away. The doctors, nurses, and orderlies on the ward could not answer any of his questions. On his 5th day in the hospital, Evan received a visit from the public defender's office. It was a young attorney named Sam Wilton who was just beginning to learn criminal law. Sam had familiarized himself with Evan's case as he understood it and had a lot of information for Evan. First of all, Sam listed the charges against Evan. These were essentially the same charges that the detective had outlined. It was helpful for Evan to get a copy of the charges in writing. Sam then informed Evan that he would be arraigned the next morning at 10 a.m. Sam wanted to know how Evan was going to plead. Before Evan could respond, Sam said that if Evan agreed to plead guilty to most of the minor charges, he could negotiate with the district attorney's office. Evan interrupted Sam halfway through to say that he was not guilty of any of the charges. Evan asked about his children. Apparently, after Madison gave her statement to the police, she was released. Her sister Isabel picked her up, and she lived with Isabel and her husband until the day the crime scene investigators allowed their house to be boarded up. Evan's children were told nothing about him except that he was going to be away from the family for a long time. As for his job, Evan gave Sam his company's contact information and asked him to explain to his boss what had happened. Rereading the charges against him, Evan noted that some of the things the detective said didn't impress him enough. "What is the spousal abuse charge?" Evan asked. Sam told Evan that Vincent had added that to his complaint after Madison claimed that Evan had hit her several times. In fact, Sam had pictures of all the injuries each person had sustained. Among them were several photos of Madison's face with a pronounced black and blue bruise on her left cheek and a purple bruise on the top of her left forearm. "I didn't do that to her," Evan said. "I never touched her." As Evan looked at Sam's face, he noticed that Sam had an expression that said he didn't believe him. At that moment, Evan decided he wasn't going to give Sam any explanation as to what had really happened. Evan didn't really know if Vincent's influence extended to the public defender's office, and he didn't want to take any chances. Sam shared his perspective on Evan's case. He said Evan had 3 witnesses who were going to swear to their version of events. The evidence seemed to support their version. Sam hinted to Evan that he might be able to convince the district attorney to accept a plea bargain if Evan admitted to 2 or 3 lesser charges. At the arraignment, Sam said the DA would be happy to close Evan's case without spending a lot of energy on it. But he added, if Evan pleaded guilty, he would still face civil charges by all 3 witnesses. To be convicted of what he was accused of was unthinkable to Evan. If he had been found guilty of most of the charges in civil court, he could have been financially ruined. There was no way he would have agreed to a guilty plea or a plea bargain. "Sam," Evan said, "you have to plead not guilty at the hearing." "All right, Mr. Mitchell," Sam replied. "But you should know that after you're accused of shooting someone, you'll have to post bail. Even though you haven't confessed it, the evidence the district attorney's office has could easily prove that you were the shooter. I appreciate everything you're trying to do for me, Sam. I'm guessing from your tone that you think I'm probably guilty. However, I'm not." Evan didn't bother to tell Sam that he might have a videotape that would prove that he was guilty of self-defense only. He didn't want the fact that he had any evidence at all to get to the district attorney or, much less, Vincent Collins. Instead, Evan told Sam that he needed him to contact his attorney. Evan didn't really have an attorney. He had an uncle who had spent his entire career in the Navy Judge Advocate Staff Corps and was now retired. His uncle went from defense counsel when he was a junior officer to prosecutor, judge, and the office of Judge Advocate General of the U.S. Navy. After retiring with the rank of captain, his uncle moved to the San Francisco area, passed the California bar exam, and then joined a family practice law firm. When he retired, he used his experience and knowledge as a volunteer child advocate in the court system. Evan's uncle's name was Jonathan Allen Carter, but everyone used his initials, JAC, and referred to him as Jack or Uncle Jack. As in Evan's case, since he didn't have Uncle Jack's contact information handy, Evan gave Sam what he could remember and asked him to make some inquiries. Sam was not to tell anyone else about Evan's attempt to contact Uncle Jack. He was only to tell Uncle Jack that Evan was in serious legal trouble, give him a list of the charges against him, and tell him that he had pleaded not guilty and needed his help. Sam contacted Evan late that night to inform him that his uncle would be at his house the day after tomorrow. He also told Evan that Uncle Jack had advised him not to talk to anyone about his case and to only say, "not guilty," at the trial. The next day, Evan was arraigned in the courtroom, which was televised from the hospital. Apparently, many people had been through similar trials before, as the hospital ward had a room set up for such cases. As expected, the charges were read out, and Evan was asked how he pleaded to each one of them. He replied, "not guilty." The prosecutor asked that Evan be remanded in custody without bail because he was considered dangerous. The judge stated that Evan's doctors felt he should stay in the hospital for 2 more days and then he would be transferred to the county jail to await a hearing. At the hearing, the judge would decide whether to put Evan on trial. The day before Evan was to be transferred to the county jail, his uncle Jack showed up. Jack drew up the paperwork to officially represent Evan and got permission to visit him in the hospital. Evan had never been so happy to see a friendly face in his life. He hugged his uncle and cried a little until he realized the gravity of his situation. After a brief reunion, Uncle Jack got down to business. First, he asked for a private room where they could talk privately. Then he touched on a few household topics that he felt Evan should know. Jack spoke briefly with Isabel, who he knew casually as a member of the family. Most importantly, he told Evan that his children were fine. Madison and the children were staying with Isabel and her family for the time being, at least until the police cleared the house for occupancy. Isabel was confused by the charges against Evan but found it hard to believe everything that was said about him. She was glad that Uncle Jack was there to help. Next, Uncle Jack wanted to know exactly what had happened to put Evan in his current position. In a very whispered conversation, Evan told his uncle what really happened. Jack shook his head and said it was an unbelievable story. Evan went on to tell him that sometime after his arrest, Vincent, Carter, and Madison conspired to come up with an alternate version of the events. In an even more hushed tone, Evan told Uncle Jack that he had a videotape of the entire event on his iPhone. Jack didn't show any emotion, but Evan could tell he was relieved to know there might be solid evidence to back up his story. The only downside was that the phone was hidden in a drawer in the kitchen of his house. Uncle Jack assured Evan that he would be his guardian angel during this whole ordeal. He said Evan's only task now was to get well. In the meantime, Jack was going to study the case against Evan in detail and develop a defense strategy. He was also going to find out if Evan could be bailed out. Evan was to wait for a few days, and Jack would contact him. Jack left the hospital and returned to his hotel room to begin his investigation. He knew that time was of the essence and that he needed to act quickly. He hired a private investigative agency to help him gather evidence and work on several leads. The most difficult task was finding Evan's cell phone hidden in the kitchen table drawer. Jack was sure he couldn't retrieve it himself due to the restraining order preventing Evan from being near his wife and children. Breaking into the house to get it back was out of the question. Jack knew he would find a way sooner or later, but for now, there was no such opportunity. In the meantime, Jack set up a new cell phone account for himself and Evan so they could communicate. One of the people Evan called was his neighbor, the Colonel. The Colonel told Evan about some things going on at the house that he might want to know about. When Evan told Jack about it, Jack asked him to invite the Colonel over for a few beers and steaks at the barbecue. The Colonel told Jack that one evening about a week after the incident, and before the house was returned to Madison, he heard his brown Labrador, Seer, barking at something outside. From his window, he looked across the street to Evan's driveway and noticed 2 men in dark clothing surreptitiously shining a flashlight on the front door of the garage. The Colonel called 911 and reported a possible break-in. He then quickly dressed, carrying his dog and an aluminum bat, and crossed the street to confront the intruders. The intruders did not see or hear him approach until he stood behind them. "You picked the wrong neighborhood to rob," he said. When the robbers turned around, the colonel took a picture of them. They were wearing hoods that would prove to any skeptics that they were indeed intruders. The would-be bandits jumped back at first but immediately realized the colonel was alone. "You'd better get out of here, old man," one of them said and stepped toward him threateningly. The colonel's brown lab couldn't be seen well in the darkness, but her menacing growl was heard by the bandits as she stepped between the colonel and the bad guys, baring her teeth. In addition, the colonel raised his bat and stood in the batter's stance, preparing to field the pitched ball. The second of the two thieves said, "Let's get out of here." They fled down the driveway and got into a black SUV that was parked a few houses down the block. The colonel followed them into the street and watched them drive away. He noticed that the license plate was smudged. A few minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up, and the colonel briefed the officers on what had happened. After a half-hour inspection of the premises, they wrote a report and left. Evan remembered that Vincent had threatened to plant drugs in his car and then have him searched on an anonymous tip. If Vincent was as influential in the police force as he claimed, Evan was glad that he had gotten the colonel to move his car to a safe location unknown to Madison or Vincent. As if that story wasn't enough, the colonel had another one. 2 days after Madison was allowed back into the house, the colonel noticed a black SUV parked in front of the house. As he continued to watch, he saw two men talking to Madison in front of the open garage door. Judging by the hand gestures, Madison was pointing to the empty stall where Evan's car was usually parked. After a few minutes of animated conversation, Madison and her guests went inside. The men left after about 45 minutes. The colonel transcribed the license plate number of the black SUV. Jack checked the plate number against one of his sources and found it was registered to a company called Unique Services. Further investigation revealed that Unique Services was registered as a private investigation company employing Jose Gonzalez and Miguel Ortega. Both had been police officers in different cities. Jose was asked to resign after a question about the theft of evidence from the police evidence locker, and Miguel was fired for falsifying arrest records. Unique Services had the law firm of Vincent Collins as a client. Now it became paramount to retrieve Evan's cell phone from the kitchen of the house. Jack devised a plan to call Madison and ask if he could come over and talk to her directly and informally about the situation. He explained that he wanted to help both Evan and her by dropping many of the charges and settling a number of issues that would improve the situation for everyone involved. Madison knew Jack as a family member and they often met at family gatherings. Nevertheless, she regarded his intentions with some suspicion and said she would call him back. The next day, she called him back, and they arranged to meet in the evening at 6 p.m. She added that her attorney insisted that one of his assistants attend the meeting as well. Jack readily agreed to this condition. Jack told Evan everything that had happened. At exactly 6 p.m., Jack rang the doorbell at Evan's house. Madison answered quickly and invited him in. He said he was glad to see her again, and they even hugged for a minute. Madison was dressed very modestly in a knee-length skirt and white blouse, her hair gathered in a ponytail. Once inside, Jack noticed a young man in a suit and tie. Madison introduced him as Gordon Merritt, an associate in the law firm of Vincent Collins. They shook hands, and the three of them settled into the large family room. Madison apologized and said she would bring them coffee. Once they were seated, Mr. Merritt suggested they get down to business. Before he did, he pulled out a tape recorder, placed it on the coffee table, and said he was going to record their conversation. Jack pulled out his recorder and placed it next to the attorney's recorder. Both lawyers smiled at each other. Jack started the conversation. "I'm very sorry that the situation has turned out this way for both you and Evan. You two have always been some of my favorite people and always seemed so in love with each other. I'm sorry too, Uncle Jack. I never meant for things to get this far. I can't believe things got out of control," Madison lamented. Jack continued as if he believed the charges against Evan were accurate and was skeptical of Evan's version of events. "You probably know," Jack continued, "that Evan claims you and Mr. Collins were having an affair. When he saw Collins at the house ready to take you to a business meeting, he just couldn't take it anymore and got very angry. He has always loved you so much." Madison looked at Mr. Merritt, who nodded that she should speak. "I didn't mean for Evan to be so hurt. I'm very sorry," Madison said, tears streaming down her face. Jack stood up and reached into his pocket for a handkerchief to give her. "Madison, we have been through many difficulties in our lives and always managed to forgive each other. I know you are very sorry. Do you think that Mr. Collins could let things go? And do you think we could work on our marriage for the good of our children? We could drop all charges. That way, we could get back together. Think of your children." Madison continued to sob. Mr. Merritt spoke. "What you are suggesting is a good idea. I have an agreement that would go a long way toward repairing your relationship with Madison and settling things between you and Mr. Collins. If you want, I can go to the office now and get it so we can review it." Jack took advantage of the opportunity and said, "Please, if you don't mind, I'll stay here with Madison while you retrieve the agreement." Madison took out a piece of paper and wrote down the items she wanted him to pick up and sign. Mr. Merritt returned to his car and drove away. Jack got up and walked across the room to the kitchen. "Madison, I haven't been in this house for several years. Have you renovated anything? This kitchen looks great." "Yes, we remodeled the kitchen when we moved in, Uncle Jack. Evan always liked it," Madison said. Jack continued to walk around the kitchen, pointing out features he liked. Then he approached the drawer with the dish towels. "Would you please let me get a cup of coffee from here?" Jack said. "Yes, Uncle Jack, please do." Jack grabbed a cup of coffee and felt under the folds of the dish towels. His heart jumped for joy when he found Evan's cell phone. He grabbed it and put it in his pocket before Madison realized what he was doing. "Uncle Jack, what are you doing?" Madison asked, confused. "I'm just grabbing a cup of coffee, sweetie," Jack said, and walked back to the living room. About 20 minutes later, Mr. Merritt returned. Jack pretended to be very interested in the agreement. He thanked Mr. Merritt and Madison for their time and left the house. On the way to his car, he quickly dialed Evan's number on the phone to check if it was still working. It rang once, and he quickly turned it off. Jack returned to his hotel room and called Evan to tell him the good news. Evan was thrilled and thanked his uncle for the great work he had done. Jack told Evan he would examine the phone thoroughly and get the evidence needed to prove his innocence. Later that night, Jack connected Evan's phone to his laptop and downloaded the video. He was relieved to see that it was still intact and not tampered with. Jack watched the entire recording and saw that it clearly showed Evan acting in self-defense against Vincent and Carter. It also captured the conversation where Madison and Vincent admitted to their affair and their plan to manipulate Evan. Armed with this new evidence, Jack felt confident that they could turn the tide in Evan's favor. He began drafting a detailed report and preparing to present the video to the court. Jack also contacted a trusted colleague in the legal field, who agreed to review the evidence and provide additional support. In the following days, Jack worked tirelessly to build a strong defense for Evan. He gathered witness statements, including one from the colonel, who confirmed the suspicious activities around Evan's house. Jack also secured a forensic expert to authenticate the video and ensure its admissibility in court. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Evan was nervous but hopeful, knowing that Jack had done everything possible to prepare. As they entered the courtroom, Evan saw Madison and Vincent sitting with their attorney, looking confident. Evan's heart pounded, but he trusted his uncle. The judge called the hearing to order, and the prosecution presented its case, relying heavily on the testimonies of Madison, Vincent, and Carter. They painted Evan as a violent and dangerous man who had attacked them without provocation. When it was Jack's turn to present the defense, he began by outlining the events leading up to the incident. He then played the video recording for the court. The footage clearly showed Vincent attacking Evan with the fireplace poker and Carter's aggressive behavior. The judge and jury watched intently as the video revealed the true nature of the confrontation. Madison looked down, unable to meet Evan's eyes, while Vincent shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The prosecution tried to object, but the judge overruled them, allowing the video to continue playing. After the video ended, Jack presented the statements from the colonel and other witnesses who had observed suspicious activities around Evan's house. He also submitted the forensic expert's report, confirming the authenticity of the video. The judge called a recess to review the evidence. When court reconvened, the judge addressed the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Evan Mitchell acted in self-defense. The charges against him are dismissed, and he is free to go. Evan's heart soared with relief and gratitude. He turned to Jack, who smiled and gave him a reassuring nod. Evan stood up and embraced his uncle, thanking him for his unwavering support and dedication. As they left the courtroom, Madison approached Evan with tears in her eyes. "Evan, I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go this far." Evan looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. "Madison, you made your choices. I need to move forward and focus on rebuilding my life." Madison nodded, understanding that their relationship was beyond repair. She watched as Evan walked away with his uncle, ready to start a new chapter in his life. Evan returned home to his children, who were overjoyed to see him. He explained the situation to them in a way they could understand, assuring them that everything would be okay. With the support of his family and friends, Evan began the process of healing and rebuilding his life. In the weeks that followed, Evan resumed his work at Skytech Aerospace, grateful for the stability it provided. He also sought therapy to help him cope with the trauma he had experienced. Slowly but surely, he started to find peace and happiness again. Evan's journey had been a challenging one, but he emerged stronger and wiser. He learned the importance of trust, resilience, and the power of family. With his children by his side and a renewed sense of purpose, Evan looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came his way. As Evan settled back into his routine, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still unfinished business. Vincent's threats and the lingering presence of Madison's betrayal haunted his thoughts. Although he had been exonerated in court, the emotional wounds were deep, and the scars of his ordeal would take time to heal. One evening, Evan received a call from his lawyer, Jack. "Evan, I have some news. We have the opportunity to file a civil lawsuit against Vincent for defamation, emotional distress, and for attempting to plant false evidence. Are you interested in pursuing this?" Evan thought for a moment. "Jack, I want to move on with my life, but I also want to make sure Vincent faces the consequences of his actions. Let's go ahead and file the lawsuit." The legal proceedings took several months. Vincent, true to his arrogant nature, initially dismissed the lawsuit as frivolous. However, as evidence mounted and more of his unethical practices came to light, he began to realize the gravity of his situation. The trial was a grueling process, but it was also cathartic for Evan. He had the chance to confront Vincent in court, to tell his story, and to seek justice for the pain and suffering he had endured. Throughout the trial, Evan was supported by his family, friends, and colleagues. His children, now more aware of the situation, stood by him with unwavering support. Even Madison, now estranged from Vincent and living with her sister, testified against Vincent, admitting to the manipulation and deceit that had taken place. In the end, the court ruled in Evan's favor. Vincent was ordered to pay substantial damages, and his reputation in the legal community was irrevocably tarnished. The victory was not just a legal one, it was a personal triumph for Evan. It signified the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of a brighter future. With the legal battles behind him, Evan focused on his career and his family. He received a promotion at Skytech Aerospace, becoming the lead engineer on a groundbreaking project that aimed to revolutionize space travel. His dedication and expertise earned him respect and recognition in the industry. At home, Evan worked to rebuild his relationship with his children. They went on weekend trips, explored new hobbies, and spent quality time together. The bond between them grew stronger, and Evan felt a renewed sense of purpose as a father. Madison, after the trial, reached out to Evan to apologize once more and to discuss their children's future. They agreed to co-parent amicably, putting their children's well-being first. While their marriage was beyond repair, they managed to find a way to communicate respectfully and work together for the sake of their family. Years passed, and the memories of the past faded into the background. Evan's life was filled with new opportunities and experiences. He traveled the world, gave lectures at universities, and mentored young engineers. His resilience and strength became a source of inspiration for many. One day, while giving a keynote speech at an aerospace conference, Evan looked out at the audience and reflected on his journey. He spoke about the challenges he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the importance of perseverance. "In life, we all face obstacles that seem insurmountable," Evan said. "But it's in those moments of adversity that we discover our true strength. We must never lose hope, never stop fighting for what is right, and always strive to be the best version of ourselves." The audience erupted in applause, and Evan smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come a long way from the days of turmoil and betrayal. His life was now a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and the unwavering support of loved ones. As the conference ended, Evan walked outside and took a deep breath, looking up at the sky. He felt a sense of peace and contentment that he had not felt in a long time. The future was bright, and he was ready to embrace it with open arms. Evan's story was one of redemption and triumph. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And with the love and support of family and friends, anything is possible. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the unfolding secrets. A husband's journey through a cheating wife's deception. Evan Mitchell's story reminds us that even in the face of profound betrayal and adversity, there is always a path to healing and redemption. Through unwavering determination, Evan rebuilds his life, strengthens his bond with his children, and finds new purpose in his career and personal growth. As we conclude, let Evan's resilience inspire you to overcome your own challenges and never lose hope, no matter how dark the times may seem. If you found this story as captivating and inspiring as we did, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more incredible stories of human strength and perseverance. Thank you for watching.